In this lesson, I want to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what exactly Create React App does for us, and I also want to go deeper in depth into the eject functionality which is available on Create React App. We kind of glossed over this functionality a little bit earlier, and I want to show you more in this lesson what it actually does. Now, you do not need to follow along with the code that I'm about to write, because this is strictly for the sake of example. But what I'm going to do is create another new project using Create React App. So right here, I'm just going to use npx once again. And then once again, I'm going to use Create React App. And I can give this project a name like Eject Playground. So as we know, when we run this command, Create React App reaches out to npm and it fetches over 1,000 dependencies, including React. It initializes a Git repository, it creates the basic folder structure, creates the app component, and then plops us right back here and says, here, the project is done. You can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to navigate into the Eject Playground folder that I just created. And as we mentioned earlier, in the package.json file, in the script section, you'll find a special script called eject. What eject does, it's also mentioned here, by the way, what eject does is it basically decouples us or separates us from Create React App. It's basically us saying we want full control over tools like Webpack and Babel. We want all of the configuration files to belong to us so that we can edit them and customize them however we want. Now, the disadvantage of this approach is we are losing all the benefits of Create React App. We're basically seizing control of the logic of transpilation for our app. Typically, you don't really want to do this unless you have a special reason to do so. Maybe you have some incredibly complex or custom code in your app, or at least in the build process, that requires you to have access to those underlying files. But it's kind of breaking the spirit of Create React App, because the intent of this product is to hide away that complexity from you, to abstract away having to know Webpack and Babel and all of these additional plugins, right? So when we eject, we gain a lot of power, but we also gain a lot of responsibility of managing these dependencies for ourselves, right? So you only want to do this if it's absolutely necessary, right? And I want to show you what will happen when we eject a React app, because once we do so, we can never go back to having the original state of having Create React App manage everything for us. So here you can even see it says npm run eject removes this tool and copies build dependencies, configuration files, and scripts into your app directory. If you do this, you can't go back. So it's trying to warn you. But given that this is a throwaway project, we can feel pretty comfortable doing it right here. Once again, if you're working on a production level React app, a real world code base, be super careful. This is usually the kind of decision that you would make with your team and everybody has buy-in and agrees and that kind of stuff. But for our little project here, it's not really dangerous. So I'm going to run npm run eject. It's going to give us one additional confirmation that says, are you really sure you want to eject? This action is permanent. I'm going to press Y for yes, and that is going to kickstart the ejection process. I just want to scroll up to show you what some of these terminal outputs include. You can see what's going to happen is it's first going to create a config directory with a whole bunch of configuration files. You can see here it's even dealing with things like Webpack. Jest is related to our test runner. Here is a new scripts directory to deal with our build process, the app start process. This is things like the React dev server that is rendering the app in our browser and enabling things like hot module reloading, so that when we make a change in the code, we see that reflect in the browser. That's all the logic that the Create React team was handling for us that is now in our control in all of these configuration files. There's a lot of them, right? Because there's a lot of complexity. You can also see down below that rather than hide away these additional libraries under the React scripts package, which we had, we now need to manually add these npm libraries as dependencies to our project, because we are going to be directly using them within our own app's code now. These configuration files are living within our code base now, rather than living in a separate npm library, which we were previously relying on. So we've added a whole bunch of stuff to our package.json as well, and these are all the things we need, right? We need, for example, a CSS loader in order to process CSS in JSX. We need to do things like a file loader to be able to process file imports, right? We have things like post CSS, mini CSS, things like source map, which identify the line numbers in your code when you are debugging in the browser. So there's all these complex configurations that are now in our domain belonging to us, but now we have to configure them. So I just want to show you very quickly that if I open up this app in our VS Code editor, let me blow this up as well. Here is the new config directory and the new scripts directory. And here in config are all those files. So for example, I can open up the webpack configuration file. As a reminder, webpack is our bundler. This is the thing that takes all of the JavaScript in our project and combines it together into a single JavaScript file that the user receives when they load the React app. And you can see just how many different plugins there are in use right here. And I can even search for things in here like SVG. And you can see this is the actual logic that enables us to import SVG images within the application. So in the starter application in this project, you may recall we had that spinning React logo, the little like hydrogen atom. That was an SVG icon, and by default, you can't import it unless you tell Webpack how to recognize it. So this is all that code that the Create React team wrote for us that we still have, but now we have to customize it, we have to modify it, we have to be fully in control of it, right? You can see here it's dealing with things like recognition of JSX file extensions, things like linting, things like checking for live, which file is live in the browser, recompiling it whenever there's changes, CSS regex. You can see there's a whole bunch of complexity, and I honestly don't understand 95% of this. And if you scroll down, you'll see it's over 700 lines of configuration for Webpack alone, right? The whole point is we don't have to understand all of this. That's the beauty of Create React App, is that it hides this away from us. But if you ever want to eject, you now have those underlying files available to you to use should your team want to do that. All right, so we'll never have to do this again throughout the course, but I did want to show you what ejecting meant for an app created by Create React App. That's all there's to cover in this lesson, and I will see you in the next one.